Yeah, there it is.
There it is. Been hanging for that one all weekend long. You know, it's going to be pretty good back and forth. First of all, because the two players are great. We're talking about former world champions here, everybody. But most importantly, there's a lot of back and forth. There's a lot of play. So I think the games are going to be a little bit longer, work themselves into the mid game and maybe into the late game. For me, it is the aforementioned Vein Ripper that is going to try to steal the show here. Now, Jean-Emmanuel does have 4 copies of Lightning Axe, where some players had less than that. Now he's going to need a creature alongside that because of the war trigger. But if he can contain, for Manfield, if he can contain Vein Ripper, he's going to be okay here. The question is, if Seth has on the battlefield, can Jean-Emmanuel get it off the battlefield? If he can win. If he can't, it's going to be over pretty quick.
All right, well, let's find out what's about to happen. It's time for our first quarterfinal here at Pro Tour Murders at Karlov Manor. I'm going to pass it on over to Marshall and Monty.
Yeah, thank you, Maria. Thank you, everybody at the news desk. Welcome to the booth here. That's Monty DeVuti. I'm Marshall Sutcliffe, and we are excited to bring you this first quarterfinal match. Monty, they broke it down. Also, we had a chat with our behind-the-scenes expert, Frank Karsten. Basically a 50-50 matchup we're looking at here.
Yeah. By the odds, really 50-50, 13-14 in the favor of Phoenix over the course of the Swiss. Now, Jean-Emmanuel hasn't played against Vampires in this event, but he is undefeated with Phoenix this weekend. For Seth, he's played against Phoenix twice, and he's won both matches.
Wow, so really, really close. And normally, you know, you'd give the edge to the world champion.
Yeah.
They're both world
Which
champions.
one?
Yeah, exactly. Seth Manfield was our world champion back in 2015, and of course, Jean-Emmanuel Depraz is our current reigning world champion. So let's see how this thing goes here, Monty. We're going to jump right into game number 1. And as you can see, if you look at the left side of your screen, you'll see those 3 dots. Those represent the game wins needed to win the match. This is best 3 out of 5.
Yeah, and there is sideboarding after the second game rather than the first game in our top 8 here. So it is going to be a bit of a different dynamic in terms of pre-board, post-board games, which is important because in the pre-board games, there's a big emphasis on interaction for Jean-Emmanuel Depraz. The 2 copies of Spell Pierce is going to be really important to keep a quick Sorin off the board. But also, as Cedric mentioned, those Lightning Axes can indeed get Vein Ripper off the board should it make it, though it comes at a heavy cost, usually 4 life because you are sacrificing a creature, and then the tempo lost of that creature sacrifice as well.
As you can see, we've got cards in hand there on the left as well. Any initial thoughts, Monty, on the opening hand there for perhaps Seth?
The hand for Seth isn't doing what we need it to, or what Seth needs it to. No Sorin Vein Ripper to be seen. There are lands, there's some removal, and the Dust Legion Zealot into Preacher curve can be powerful, or Dust Legion Zealot into Fable. He did find the 3rd land that he needed, so that curve is now online. But the 2 copies of Fatal Push, not exactly what you're looking for. When you're Seth in this matchup, you'd rather be the proactive player, not the reactive one, and force JED to be reacting to you.
I see, and that's not something that JED is particularly well set up to do here.
JED has the Spell Pierce, so the Sorin combo, as well as that Fable, is off the table, but he doesn't have an answer to Preacher right now, which is one of the big problem cards that we've seen in the matchup. So if Seth just untaps, goes Mutavault Preacher here, that might be a problem for JED's hand as it currently stands.
Seth Manfield running a slightly different build of this Rakdos Vampires deck than the one that most of the team he tested with was Team Channel Fireball. He's actually cut down on just 2 of those Dusk Legion Zealots. Going for a little bit more punch. He has a Shieldred in the main deck, for example.
Yeah. Really great card in the matchup, of course, still does die to Lightning Axe. So the copies of Lightning Axe in JD's deck really almost overtaxed in this matchup between the targets of Preacher, Shieldred, Vein Ripper, a lot of things you want to kill with those. But if any of those threats from Seth do survive and last on the board, it will continue putting JD further and further behind because all of those cards have this effect of compounding value, whether Shieldred is with the drains, Preacher with the creation of the tokens, or drawing cards, and of course Vein Ripper just making life so difficult for your opponent in multiple different axes.
Ledger Shredder is going to be the play here for Jean-Emmanuel Depraz. He's going to pass the turn back. The other card that Seth gets is an extra Duress as well. So 2 slight little bumps in his favor for the matchup. A Duress and a Shieldred versus a pair of Dusk Legion Zealot. So that, you know, a little something here and there for him.
Yeah, the Zealots do a great job of smoothing out your draws, but the duress does give you an extra angle of being able to turn 4, for example, go duress your opponent, and then make sure the coast is clear, drop the Sorin, go Vein Ripper. Of course, again, this is not the plan for Seth's current hand, but it is something that he has access to in these pre-board games.
And it looks like he's going to take this turn to resolve that Preacher of the Schism, get that thing down and get it rolling. He does have a pair of Fatal Push in hand, so having Jean-Emmanuel cast a Ledger Shredder is probably a good thing for Seth. It actually gives him a target for a card he has 2 of in hand.
Yeah, he would have loved to be able to remove the Ledger Shredder that turn before JD is able to have a turn like this where he can start with Free the Fae, then cast a second spell, get that Connive trigger, and put a Phoenix in the graveyard. This Lightning Axe will also do the same job of killing this Preacher as well as getting the Phoenix in the graveyard, so that's really nice. Seth has that Fable of the Mirror Breaker, but you really don't want to cast that into 1 open mana, so Seth really identifying that this is the moment where you want to push with creatures rather than non-creature permanents here.
By the way, that Free the Fae almost missed. It went Shredder, Shredder, land. But there was a Lightning Axe in there as well, so he was able to convert.
You only really need 1. That's the beauty of Free the Fae, is most of the time, you don't want this card to find specific spells. You just want it to find 1 spell and put 3 cards in the graveyard. Now, if a card that went to the graveyard is a Phoenix, that's a bonus. If the spell you find, like this Lightning Axe, is something you're looking for, that's a bonus. But the card is really just part of your engine.
Speaking of Phoenix, he's going to discard a Phoenix 2 Lightning Axe to get rid of the Preacher. So it's not going to even get 1 attack step in.
And I believe JD can still play a land for the turn, so could bring back that Phoenix if he wants, but given how cautiously we've seen him play this weekend, I think he'll opt to just leave back that Spell Pierce, knowing that for at least 1 more turn, Spell Pierce can stop Sorin putting in a Vein Ripper.
Yeah, the other card that Spell Pierce is good against is Fable the Mirror Breaker, and Seth happens to have that one in hand. His hand does not look great, though. He's got 3 lands, 2 pushes, and the Fable, and if he goes for the Fable, it's going to get pierced by one of, I believe, 2 main deck Spell Pierce there from Jean-Emmanuel, and so it looks like he's going to take an alternate route. At least for this opening turn, he's going to go for Fatal Push, maybe hoping to draw something. Nope.
Love this. I really love that Seth is continuing to not give Jean-Emmanuel Depraz an opportunity to use the Spell Pierce that is more or less being telegraphed here with the blue open mana. You would think that if Jean-Emmanuel Depraz didn't have anything, he would have tried to get that Phoenix back the previous turn. So even if he's bluffing it, there's no reason for Seth with a threat light hand like this to throw away his Fable when the next turn he can play the 5th land and be able to pay for a Spell Pierce.
If you're just tuning in, we're really happy to have you along. This is 2 world champions, and this is going to be about the highest level play that you're going to see our game played at.
I think JD might just deploy this Prankster and pass.
Look at the patience by both of these players. Nobody wants to give anything. No risk taken. Seth has plenty of lands in hand, so now he knows if he'd like, he can go for his Fable the Mirror Breaker and still be able to pay for a Spell Pierce. He's going to start off with a Swamp.
Yeah, JD, a little awkward, doesn't really want to cast this Temporal Trespass when he's not using it to pressure. He wants to save those cards in the graveyard for a Treasure Cruise. But at the moment, he definitely has better top decks than Seth. The problem is Seth just resolved a Fable, so next turn, 2 of those lands in hand are going to turn into potential spells, and that really pushes the advantage over to his side.
Yeah, so there's a Fable of the Mirror Breaker on the battlefield now for Seth Manfield, and he's going to be able to use that to get a huge advantage here, especially given his hand. He's got Fatal Push and 2 lands left, so he can't wait for Chapter 2 to hit on that Fable.
Chapter 2 is going to feel potentially real nice. Definitely those 2 lands are going to go away. If Seth can find even 1 action spell, that would be really great for him and for JD.
Speaking of finding an action spell, can Jean-Emmanuel find one of his own? Was that a land off the top?
Steam Vents.
He just doesn't have anything going right now.
Yeah. The good news is he's not under that much pressure. The bad news is he knows that Fable is there, so the clock is quick for him to find something.
Yeah, that Fable is kind of Seth's version of a Treasure Cruise type effect. He's going to be able to improve his hand dramatically, and don't forget he gets his draw step as well. And Jean-Emmanuel would love to be able to go toe-to-toe with that type of thing, but he can't find the action.
Not at the moment. He does have this pick lock prankster, so at least it is a bit of a speed bump. He's not going to be taking that much damage. Though Seth can start attacking into it. He will have 2/2/2s. That's the vigilance creature. So just the tap, meaning take one. And that's pretty much all Jean-Emmanuel can do unless he really wants to fire off this trespass. But that comes at such a great cost of a lot of cards from his graveyard that he could be using to delve a potential Treasure Cruise.
Right. I mean, the idea would be I'm going to take an extra turn so that I can find a cruise.
Right.
But if you annihilate your graveyard to do it, it might not be worth it. But he is actually going to go for it here. So it's 11 total, so he's still got to come up with 6 cards out of the yard. And there they are. No,
And
perhaps a sign.
out.
Desperation's a strong word, but, you know, urgency here for Jean-Emmanuel Depraz.
The logic here being that you still do have some cards left in the graveyard and you have access to a lot of mana. You're falling very far behind when you pass this turn. So Jean-Emmanuel just hoping to set up a better position than he otherwise would be.
Seth Manfield is going to deploy his Fatal Push just to take down the Prankster. This is a big draw step now for Jean-Emmanuel.
No, okay.
It's an opt. It might turn into a cruise.
Second Lightning Axe on top. I think that's going to the bottom.
Okay. You really need something good. It's another Steam Vents off the top. Wow, Jean-Emmanuel really digging, looking for some payoff and cannot find it. He even burned his Temporal Trespass really for no effect at this point.
Yep. One of the issues here is Jean-Emmanuel Depraz, he's lost 3 of his Ledger Shredders. We saw 1 in play and 2 more got milled to a Free the Fae earlier.
That's right.
So one of the cards that would allow him to potentially sift through these extra lands in hand, he doesn't have access to those anymore. So the looting effect on the Connive from the Shredder is a really big deal. I like the shock here from the Steam Vent, surprisingly enough, because it allows him to full cost a Lightning Axe and not have to discard a card. So trading 2 life for having this land and playing, using it for Treasure Cruise later, I think he'll have to fire off this Lightning Axe on probably the Goblin Shaman token, maybe the Mutavault if Seth gives them access to it, but they're serving similar roles here.
And somehow it looks like Seth turned 2 lands into 2 lands, but his draw step is Smuggler's Copter, so he did get something out of the deal. I think his hand is Soul's Copter now. He's going to play that Cavern.
Yeah. Almost certainly named Vampire. No real reason to name anything else.
Okay. There's the Copter.
Look, this is what JED needed, was for Seth to miss on that Fable, and this is as close to a miss as you can get.
That's right. He's going to activate Mutavault and try to line up an attack.
I think this is Lightning Axe on the Goblin Shaman.
Jean-Emmanuel trying to hang on long enough to find some action. The deck is really good at doing that.
Doing the math over 2 turns, if you take 5 here, the next turn, Seth can use the Reflection of Kiki-Jiki to crew the Copter, and that's an attack for 8.
Hardcast?
Going for the Mutavault.
Yeah, otherwise he wouldn't have let the attack happen. There's a treasure coming as well.
Yeah, you can't afford to go to 8 and then have an attack for 8 coming, because the next turn you'll be in the same position where you have to fire off the axe, except then you'll have to discard a card or use 6 mana that needs to go to something else.
Right.
So you have to use it here.
Okay, big draw step here for Jean-Emmanuel Depraz, trying to get back into game 1. Can he find a Treasure Cruise or some way to get to a Treasure Cruise? It's another land off the top. That's probably the best land he could draw at this point, but...
It's a very low bar for best land.
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
This is very much a back and forth, small advantages game so far. Nobody's really been able to blow the doors off with anything amazing. but Seth has incrementally gotten ahead. And as you can see, his board state looks pretty nice here. The Mutavault died last turn, so it's not going to be able to come in. But still, this is 6 damage down to 4 and another treasure token.
I think Seth has isolated JD's hand to Spell Piercer a land, and not a useful land. So I wouldn't even be surprised for Seth to discard a Thoughtseize here because he is not firing that off.
And he is going to use the other Thoughtseize just to take away the presumed Spell Pierce, and that's exactly what it is. That can sometimes be the third spell, you know, in an awkward situation for Jean-Emmanuel.
Yeah,
all right,
big draw.
Maybe Treasure Cruise here. All right, he's got to consider. Oh, consider into hand.
Okay.
Okay, and it is going to be Free the Fae. Oh, still no cruise, but there was a sleight of hand.
You have to take that.
Can keep going. His graveyard's restocked again, too, so if he can find a cruise with this sleight.
Cruise is 1 mana. That Picklock Prankster is a blocker.
Oh, there's
That's
a treasure cruise right off the top there.
Okay.
Easy decision, and finally it shows up. Now what, though? He has 1 Phoenix in the yard, is that correct?
That's my count.
Yeah. And this will be the 3rd spell already. So what does he find? Land.
Fire Impulse is big.
Land.
Fire Impulse is big.
It means he's not dead.
Yeah, you get to go Fire Impulse, kill the Reflection. You can't have that alive. Play the Picklock Prankster, bring the Phoenix back, leave it back.
Big turn for Jean-Emmanuel at the very last minute.
This game just got close. Not that close, but close.
Yeah, Seth has a lot of live action here to find his way out, but take a look. He's got Cavern of Souls in hand. He has nothing else going.
Prankster.
And he doesn't need to. He can just fire away here.
Yeah.
And there it goes.
You can't let Seth untap with that because that can just target a Zealot. Yes, you can remove the Zealot, but then you're removing a Zealot. Not ideal.
Right. Okay, big top deck now for Seth Manfield.
Gets
He's
2
got
draws this turn.
Jean-Emmanuel down to 4.
Land.
He drew another land? The Smuggler's Copter will provide.
Yeah, but it comes at the cost of trading with a Phoenix. Seth has to do it, I think, because if he draws a Vein Ripper, he wins this game. But
right.
If he doesn't, this game's fallen away.
Does get to attack with both creatures, though. This does mean that Jean-Emmanuel takes no damage this combat. It's a second Smuggler's Copter. And
that's not bad.
The Sulphur Springs. Yeah, any threat at this point, right?
Yeah, especially because Copter just lets Seth keep sifting through cards, trying to find the extra Vein Ripper, trying to find some threat. Even the Fatal Pushes are great here.
Strangely, yeah. Okay, so post-combat, Smuggler's Copter number 2. The other one died. Traded off for the Arclight Phoenix. Another big top deck here, though, for Jean-Emmanuel. Can he find more action?
Oh,
okay,
boy.
Another Free the Fae. This worked last time. There's a Lightning Axe.
And a Phoenix in the yard.
Opt and a Phoenix in the yard. Okay.
You take the opt. You keep going.
You try to keep this train rolling.
2 Phoenixes coming back would be huge.
He only needs to find 1 more spell off the opt.
Gets 2 looks at it.
Oh, let's see if he can do it.
That's a sleight of hand. Yep,
He
that'll do.
He found it.
Oh, this deck, Marshall. There's a reason this is the most played deck in the room.
And there's that sleight of hand for number 3.
Fiery Impulse. That stops the Copter.
He is finding exactly what he needs these last 2 turns to not only stay alive, but he's going to start turning the tide here.
I think you take the Impulse, cut down on the cards that Seth is able to see. Phoenix goes on the bottom. It's a cost to pay, but it's a small cost in this situation. 2 Phoenixes coming back here. Another Picklock Prankster in the Adventure Zone right now. And Jean-Emmanuel still has that Hall of Storm Giants. So when he starts attacking, the attacks are going to be very large. This game is going to end pretty quickly.
So what does Seth need to find now? He's going to be facing down a couple of Phoenixes and potentially another Picklock Prankster plus a removal spell in hand from Jean-Emmanuel. Whoa.
I think it's attacking time.
Oh, he's going to get in there?
Yes. You have 2 blockers plus a Fiery Impulse.
7 is a lot of damage. In fact, half of Seth Manfield's remaining life total. And we're going to call the corner turned here for Jean-Emmanuel Depraz. The question is, can Seth get out of it? What is his...
Exactly, Vein
just
Ripper. Vein Ripper and Prey. You have 3 treasure tokens, so you'll have all of your creatures untapped.
Okay, let's see if Seth Manfield can find it. We haven't seen one yet. There's Vein Ripper. Let's see if he can draw it.
Thoughtseize, isn't it?
Thoughtseize off the top. Exactly what he doesn't want to see.
JD just won this game.
Are you serious right now? Boy, he cut that one close, didn't he?
He made us sweat.
He was down to 4 and had nothing.
Yeah.
But to me, the best card in that deck that I've seen, is the Prankster.
Yep.
That's
single-handedly won this game.
Unbelievable addition to that deck.
Yeah. This deck has just been rising up and up in terms of popularity because of Sleight of Hand and Picklock Prankster joining the fold.
And there's a removal spell.
Yep.
And that's going to do it. Jean-Emmanuel Depraz, cut it right down to the wire, but finds exactly what he needs to get the job done and picks up game number 1 against Seth Manfield in our Battle of the World Champions here in our quarterfinal. This is about a 50-50 matchup between 2 all-timers.
Yep.
Seth's already in the hall. Jean-Emmanuel Depraz is definitely that quality of player, let's just say.
Seth can't believe he lost that game.
He is going to be very sad to have lost that game. He found so many reactive cards. Now, I'll remind you that we are playing best 3 out of 5. This is a pre-sideboarded game as well, so just shuffle up, start over again.
Yeah, pre-sideboard, there's definitely a small advantage to JED. Post-board, when Seth gets Leyline in the Void, that does definitely flip, though JED's build is tuned to be able to win through Leyline. 3 copies of Crackling Drake in the sideboard. We saw him do good work against Jason Yee yesterday when they had Rest in Peace on the battlefield. So certainly not a GG. But pre-board, Seth really needs Sorin Vein Ripper. And this game, he has half of it. He has a Vein Ripper in hand now.
All right, 2 lands. So far for Seth, being on the play. And he's got a Smuggler's Copter on turn 2 before passing the turn back over to Jean-Emmanuel. I should say, putting Smuggler's Copter on the stack before asking Jean-Emmanuel if it resolves. Jean-Emmanuel feigns as if he has a decision, but he does not. And he says, okay. Land go for Depraz.
Fire Impulse not online quite yet. You do need to get that Spell Mastery in the graveyard for it to deal 3. But won't take much. Picklock Prankster usually does the job by itself.
Curious to see what Seth does here. He played the Smuggler's Copter, and Jean-Emmanuel thought about it for a second as if he maybe had a Spell Pierce and said, okay. Does Seth Manfield say, if you had it, you would have fired it off here? And that is exactly what he's going to say, because he's just going for it. He's going to play the most high impact, best mana use card here, Fable and Mirror Breaker. He had Blood Tithe Harvester that he could do to still get the Copter in the air and play around Spell Pierce, but he's like, you don't got it.
It's about mana efficiency. It's the idea that if Jean-Emmanuel had it in that spot, he should use it because of the 2 mana plays that the deck wants to do. Ledger Shredder, Picklock Prankster, or Free the Fae more specifically. So force him to have it, and if he doesn't, it's such a huge payoff for you.
That's right. It also enables the next turn really well, where he could potentially cast 2 Blood Tithe Harvesters and kind of flood the board. In the meantime, though, he is going off. That Goblin token is going to get in the Copter and fly over for 3 plus Wow, finding another Fable. What does he discard here is the question. This is actually a little bit difficult because land into double spell next turn isn't too bad either, but I suppose if you substitute it for just another Fable, you're not sad.
Yeah, he will have...
Oh, he discarded the Fable. Yep, so he wants that double spell next turn.
Yeah, he does have the potential treasure token from the Goblin Shaman, but doesn't want to rely on that staying alive. So this does make it a bit more flexible for the next turn.
Okay, and we're going to see Free the Fae on end step. It found an opt this time. No Phoenix in the yard of note.
This is definitely a much better hand for Seth. You can see all action, all proactive.
That's right.
No fatal pushes, no Thoughtseize, no duress. It's all about just pushing pressure. JD's life total is going to go down quick, and he has refills when these creatures potentially get removed.
He also has that Vein Ripper looming, right? A Sorin off the top could put it into play. A few treasure tokens off the Shaman could get it onto the battlefield the good old-fashioned way.
Exactly. And I think just the possibility of that is probably going to be enough to force JD's hand on a potential Fiery Impulse, taking out this Goblin Shaman before Seth is able to untap. But there's still a lot that JD has to deal with on that side.
He's going to cast Opt here.
He does have the option available to go Lightning Axe rather than Fiery Impulse to discard that Arclight Phoenix, get it back as an attacker or a blocker here. I think that would be interesting. Lightning Axe is the removal spell he has available for a Vein Ripper, but here it is just such a great tempo play to do it that you sort of have to. And I love leaving it on defense.
That's so great. Man, just three mana, 3 spells, and you get a Phoenix back. Sifting through the deck and even killing that Goblin Shaman in the process.
Oh, Marsh.
What'd you see?
Sorin.
Oh, Sorin off the top?
Tapped out, Sorin into play. Lightning Axe in the graveyard instead of in hand. We might be done here.
What did Cedric say? Ripping veins and taking names?
Yep.
Vein Ripper getting in a copter is kind of a overkill, let's just say.
A little bit. And, you know, for Seth, it's a pretty high incentive to get this Phoenix off the board because the Vein Ripper's ward, sacrifice a creature, that is something that you really want to make it difficult for your opponent to do. So if this copter gets crewed and attacks, JD can't really block freely.
Right. He's going to have to work his way up to either casting a Picklock Prankster or getting a Phoenix back again, and then also having the removal spell in hand. And right now,
here we go.
He's got a Fiery Impulse, but he does not have the Lightning Axe anymore. And there's Sorin on the battlefield. This is the combo that this deck is built around. Otherwise, it plays mostly like a normal Rakdos mid-range deck, but here's the difference. This one has a -3. You can put a vampire card from your hand onto the battlefield, and that is a very cheap way to put a Vein Ripper down. It's extremely difficult to deal with, and there's a big bonus too. You get Sorin left over.
Yeah, a lot of Planeswalkers, their third ability is referred to as its ultimate because it's usually the most powerful. And it's one that comes at a few turns of the Planeswalker being on the battlefield before you can activate it to get that payoff. Sorin being a 3-mana Planeswalker that can use its most powerful ability immediately and remain on the battlefield, that is an incredibly powerful card for just 3 mana.
That's right. And you can see why. Big headache here for Jean-Emmanuel Depraz.
It's definitely one of those cards that is, you know, forward design, where if the format doesn't support it now, all it takes is one great vampire being printed that has a big cost, like Vein Ripper, and suddenly the card just shoots up in value and priority.
That's right. And up in value enough to be built around.
Exactly.
Right? The kind of card that you go, when you're testing for a tournament like this, you say, you know, we got to test this out. How good is this Vein Ripper card?
And look, Seth drew the land. Fatal Push online now. Fatal Push really strong here because you can respond to your opponent casting a spell, trying to remove your Vein Ripper.
So
that ward goes on the stack. You remove their only creature. The ward fizzles.
They cannot pay, and therefore it gets countered. It is...
becomes a counter spell, essentially.
Exactly. It's interesting because, you know, I often think about cards these days when I read them as, does it work the way you want it to?
Right.
Or is it like, no, you don't get that? And Vein Ripper basically across the board works the way you want it to.
Exactly. It really does earn its mythic status of just being this large, imposing threat that threatens to end the game immediately.
That's right. Yeah, and you know, it's interesting because particularly in Constructed, you know, the ward sacrifice a creature. There are decks that do not often have a creature on the battlefield or have a very difficult time keeping one on. And when your deck is red-black mid-range, you usually have the ability to kill opposing creatures at will.
I think there's definitely, you know, different degrees of ward difficulty. Ward discard a card. Annoying, but not that hard to pay. Ward pay 3 life. You know, threatens. Ward sacrifice a creature. That might be the most difficult one against a lot of Constructed decks.
Definitely. Where there are going to be decks that simply cannot pay it.
Right. What's Lotus Field combo going to do against Ward sacrifice a creature? How many creatures do they play?
Right. It's just going to be sitting there. And the other thing that Vein Ripper does is it backs that up. It's a very quick clock. 6/5 flying, smashing. If any of the creatures die, the drains add up extremely quickly as well. So really impressive card. It's just, you don't want to pay the full price for it if you can avoid it, and that's where Sorin comes in.
Most good turns here from JAD started with that Treasure Cruise. And I think if he's able to cast a 3rd spell here and get back that Arclight Phoenix, attack down the Sorin, and then try to Lightning Axe the Vein Ripper, and then Seth goes, well, my Sorin's dead, so I can Fatal Push this Arclight Phoenix. That'll be really bad. So if JD has already cast 2 spells here and can get the Phoenix back, I don't think he can afford to attack the Sorin to turn on that Fatal Push.
Yeah, this has been really interesting because Seth had a very interesting decision before, too. He had Vein Ripper plus Copter facing down just the Arclight Phoenix, and he had to decide, do I want to attack with this Copter? Is it going to force a trade? Does it leave the option for Jean-Emmanuel to try to kill Sorin and work his way back into this game the next turn? And ultimately, Seth decided, yes, I am going to attack. But the reason is what you just described. It doesn't, thanks to the Fatal Push, which, by the way, he found off the Copter, it puts Jean-Emmanuel still in a pretty sticky spot. And you can see why. Look at him. I mean, Jean-Emmanuel Depraz is probably the best player in the room. Like, I'm not talking about top 8, I mean like in the tournament.
Yeah.
And look at him. He's deep in the tank right now trying to sort out how to work through this mess. And that's just because Vein Ripper's doing its thing.
And this is part of why he's the best player in the room. Potentially the world, the reigning world champion. You know, I think when you get that title, it's fair to at least consider him the best player in the world for now. It's because he is thinking about all of these permutations. He is thinking about all the possibilities here. And I think he fired off Fiery Impulse and just let the ward fizzle it.
I see,
Says,
yeah.
I just need a 3rd spell.
Seth goes, yeah, no.
But
Not that it would have killed the Ripper anyway, but.
yeah.
So Jean-Emmanuel has decided that part of the equation is going to be killing Sorin.
Yeah, he doesn't even have an untapped land here to go for the Lightning Axe. So even if he was to try to Lightning Axe and then be punished by a Fatal Push by killing the Sorin, he doesn't have the land to try to do it. So just
Still in combat.
this feels pretty hopeless.
Seth's going to be proactive here and just use his Fatal Push while he has Revolt on to take care of that Phoenix and put it back in the yard.
Yeah, he's at end of combat, not even letting JD go to the main phase and try to play a land to potentially have a Spell Pierce available. Just says, I'm going to do this as soon as my Revolt is active before you can do anything meaningful.
By the way, Austin in chat points out that Seth Manfield's also in the room.
Oh.
Maybe a little argument there. against our statement. I mean, these are two of the absolute best players, and that's a victory for Seth Manfield to even things up at 1 game apiece. It really does come down to Vein Ripper in those situations. If you can't deal with it, the game ends very quickly.
Ripping veins, taking names. That was the name of the game, especially in the pre-board games. It was, can Seth get Zorn into Vein Ripper? First game, no. Second game, yes, and we saw the outcome.
That's right, and that is how that will go if that Vein Ripper can come down. We're going to see post-board games, though, right after this break. And welcome back to coverage here of Pro Tour Murders at Karlov Manor. Marshall Sutcliffe with Monty DeVuti. It is Top 8 Sunday, and we have an absolute banger for our first quarterfinal. We're going to be going into Game 3 of Jean-Emmanuel Depraz, current world champion, versus Seth Manfield, 2015 world champion, and two of the best players we've ever had play this game.
Yeah, absolutely. Seth is a Hall of Famer, one of the best. There was an era of time where he was dominant, back-to-back weekends, Grand Prix victories, one of the very few to accomplish a feat like that. It is very difficult to pull off. JD, currently our world champion, top-8ing the next big event that he plays in. It's really just, it's a treat to get to watch two players of this caliber face off against each other in a quarterfinals.
Now, we are post-sideboard here, Monty, and we've got some information about the way that the players sideboarded. Interestingly, Jean-Emmanuel has decided for a much more proactive plan. He's brought in 3 Young Pyromancer, 3 Crackling Drake, and 2 Negate, and he's trimmed both of the Spell Pierces, all 4 Fiery Impulse, an Iteration, and a Temporal Trespass. Much more proactive game plan now.
Yeah, definitely designed with Leyline of the Void in mind, and I think this game, it does look like Seth mulligan to 5 here, and that is a nod to what we may expect to see from the Vampire deck post-board when you have Leyline of the Void, is more aggressive mulligans trying to find one of those 4 that you're bringing in your opening hand. But unfortunately, when you don't find it, what you're left with is a hand of 5 cards.
That's right, and that is what he brought in, 4 copies of Leyline of the Void, a Bitter Triumph, and a Rending Volley. He trimmed 2 of the Copters, a Duress, a Cavernous Souls, and both of his Dusk Legion Zealot.
Negate, one of the cards that comes in for JD post-board. Excellent skipping that timing that we previously see Seth play to, which is, okay, if I get to 5 mana, I can just play Sorin or Fable, and I don't have to worry about Spell Pierce anymore. As long as Negate is alive, you always have to worry about that line being denied.
Now, what happens with the Arclight Phoenix cards? Those are still in the deck, but this post-board strategy seems to be crafted around, well, what if my opponent has Leyline?
Arclight Phoenix you always leave in, just because if in a situation like this your opponent doesn't have Leyline, it gives you that explosiveness. When they do, a 3/2 flyer for 4 is not great, but it is often a way that the deck is still able to close out games. It is a decent amount of pressure, so you never really shave them just because of Graveyard Hate, but they do become a lot worse, and sometimes you get hands like this, which is 2 Drakes, 2 Phoenix, 2 reactive cards, 2 lands, and no pressure.
Well, we're going to see one of the reactive cards with Negate here, I'm assuming, as Fable the Mirror Breaker just went on the stack for Seth Manfield. And that is, in fact, going to draw out the Negate there from Jean-Emmanuel. So board state clear so far. Land drops would be nice for Jean-Emmanuel.
You know what's not clear? Sorin Vein Ripper in hand, and JD is out of ways to deal with that right now.
Well, he's going to go for a considered, probably just trying to find land at this point.
Land found, that's a mountain.
Okay.
Lightning Axe not doing much against that Vein Ripper as long as you can't pay.
That's right.
And here's the big issue for JD. I don't know if Seth on a mulligan to 5 can afford to wait. I don't know if Seth thinks this game gets better for him as JD his land drops. So he may just run out a Sorin Vein Ripper here, where he wouldn't if he had more tools available to him. And JD doesn't have the answer, so that Seth would get heavily rewarded for it.
Yeah, this is the why not Sorin.
Yep.
And, well, he's going to have that question answered because Jean-Emmanuel goes, uh-huh. And immediately it goes to 1 loyalty because that is Vein Ripper on the battlefield. Jean-Emmanuel has to think, come on, you mulligan, you were looking for the ley line and you found this instead?
I mean, that's part of the beauty of mulligans is you mulligan to something that's good. If it's not Leyline and if it's this, then all right, we'll settle.
That's what I like about you, Monty. You find beauty in everything, even mulligans somehow.
Look, it's part of the game. Also part of the game, the Rending Volley in Seth's hand, at least against these 2 Crackling Drakes, is going to be really good.
I'm going to put you to the ultimate challenge after this round and make you find the beauty in losing the die roll. That's
oh, I can absolutely do it.
Oh, you got that one?
Yeah,
okay,
you got an extra card in hand.
Well, we're going to save it. We got to tease the audience, you know. We got
to draw out the content.
Got to leave them wanting something.
You don't think we have enough content between 2 world champions fighting?
That's a good point, Monty. All right, you get an extra card. You're right. Jean-Emmanuel opting here. So what does this look like? He needs to find a creature to go along with the Lightning Axe.
Yep.
And then he has to just throw it right in the bin anyway.
Yep. And leave that Sorin alive. Yep.
I mean, because that's also the thing that, you know, we were talking about if you even have the option on trying to remove the Vein Ripper by having a creature, but it's also, it doesn't just check if you have it.
Right.
You have to
and
sacrifice
here's the big issue, Marshall. It needs to happen this turn because Sorin's about to put a counter on that Vein Ripper and move his toughness up to 6.
Oh,
so when it does,
anyway?
What's about to happen is JD is about to lose the game.
Right.
That is the short of it, is all of the things that he just did happen.
And he is going to get an Arclight Phoenix into the yard, but basically just force check Seth to remember his trigger.
Yeah, Seth just needs to point and say ward.
Yeah.
Or just say word.
And that does get him a chump blocker.
Yep.
Or more importantly, a creature in case he can find something. But he's looking at that Sorin and it's going to be 6 instead of 5.
Yep. Magic number.
Wow. Seth on 5 and just has turn 3 Vein Ripper.
Turn 4.
It was turn 4?
Yeah, there was a Fable run out first.
You're right. That's right.
Yeah.
Turn 4 Vein Ripper.
Much more reasonable. Yeah.
I'm sure Jean-Emmanuel agrees with you.
Yeah, JD's like, no, this is actually fair. This I'm okay with. Turn 3, no. But now, you know what? Beat me fair and square.
Great draw, really, from Seth, considering all things considered, right? Like, he was able to put out 2 must-answer threats. Jean-Emmanuel had the answer for one of them, but not the other.
Yep.
And somehow he ended up with the better threat on the battlefield because he was able to cast Fable, which, you know, Jean-Emmanuel can't just say sure.
Yeah, love a good 14-point life swing first thing in the morning.
I'm sure Jean-Emmanuel was not thinking that.
No, you don't think so?
I do not think so.
You don't think he shares that sentiment?
I do not. There's a Blood Tithe Harvester now as a follow-up play here for Manfield, and he's going to pass the turn back. Is there any possibility here for Jean-Emmanuel? Now what? He needs Burn Spell ×2, Creatures ×2?
He could just play a Crackling Drake, depending on how big it is. We don't have a full count right now. It could just be a blocker.
Okay.
He's getting rid of the Sorin, so Seth won't have more lifelink or growth on the Vein Ripper, though we know Seth has another Sorin in hand, so the duplicate is there, as well as the Rending Volley for this Drake.
Crackling Drake, draw a card.
I think
it's
this
gotta
is
be
lethal.
Right in range to...
It's just lethal. You Rending Volley the Drake, you drain for 2, you untap, you attack for 10, you throw the Blood Tithe Harvester to the face with Sorin. That's game.
That's game.
And Jean-Emmanuel's tapped out. Yeah, Seth is slapped.
But wait, there's more. Another Sorin as well.
There's more.
So that is 2 games to 1 now from Seth Manfield. And I got to say, he's got to be really happy with how that game went. It was kind of easy mode for him. Not a lot of resistance and not a lot of resistance there from Jean-Emmanuel. Just worked out kind of perfectly for him.
It's not often you can say he's really happy with how that mulligan to 5 went, but I think he's really happy with how this game goes, Marshall, because look what's on the table.
Oh, that ley line to kick things off. Little pregame actions here.
Yeah.
For Seth Manfield.
And last game, JD wasn't really suffering from ley line. This game, there's a Treasure Cruise in hand. That card's already dead.
I think Seth is going to be taking that one.
No, I think Seth will pass on that.
So is Crackling Drake the most threatening thing left? It checks both Graveyard and Exile.
It would be if JD had more than 1 land currently. So right now, I think Seth is ignoring the left part of the hand.
Okay, so
and is looking at
Treasure
Shredder.
Cruise, Drake, Arclight, don't care.
We don't care. Those don't exist right now. Right now is Shredder, which you're checking with a Fatal Push. Consider. I think it is very reasonable to just take a Consider here.
Okay, let's see what Seth decides to do.
Seth's hand not great, but Fatal Push into Fable is good enough.
Not just good enough? Let's find out. Yeah, he's going to take one of the Considers, just like you said, Monty. Oh, that's a great call. And the other one, of course, is going to get put on the stack. So Jean-Emmanuel basically just looking for lands, and that's it.
Yep.
He found one, too. That was Steam Vents off the top. And he's going to play it here. It looks like he drew a negate, but the Ledger Shredder is going to hit the battlefield for now.
Negate's a great draw. That keeps Fable off the board.
So Seth likely to kill Ledger Shredder with his Fatal Push.
If JED goes running lands here, this game goes firmly in his favor. The big issue for him was he wouldn't be able to... All right.
Oh, he misses land drop and has to pass the turn. The only saving grace is that he does have negate, and so the Fable of the Mirror Breaker, or if there were a Sorin, you know, from his perspective, something like that, won't be able to hit the battlefield.
No, stop now.
Hold on.
Take that die off the Fable, please.
Yeah, he was just doing the life totals for the Sulfur Springs there.
Yeah.
But he is going to cast, Spell Pierce, sorry, not negate.
He drew that for the turn, using that rather than the negate because knowing that this is going to fall off over a few turns, the negate will be live.
Can he find a land, please?
That's what he's thinking.
It's a young Pyromancer, so now he's faced with the decision whether to hold up negate or play young Pyromancer.
Yeah, this is the awkward part about using Spell Pierce over negate is if you don't play this young Pyromancer now, you're not playing it next turn either. If you play it, if you had held the Spell Pierce, you could say, okay, I'll wait. If I draw a land, I go young Pyromancer, land, leave up Spell Pierce. Because that line isn't happening, you either commit to playing it now or never playing it. And Jean-Emmanuel is just hoping, okay, I'm going to put the shields down for a turn, and if I get punished, well, that's my top 8 chances gone. Otherwise, I have a shot in this game.
He's just like, don't do the Soren thing again, please.
Just thinking he can't keep getting away with it.
This is like the best case scenario for Jean-Emmanuel. You see the sigh of relief. And it wasn't great. I mean, Seth did double spell that turn, but he could have just been so far behind he could never come back, and that's not the case. So we play on.
Seth is hellbent.
Another missed land here for Jean-Emmanuel. Have the wheels come off for him. It's another treasure cruise too drawn. Oh.
This is the worst case scenario.
Dead card.
And the bad part is Seth is in a point where anything is live, because if he hits a land, he can just play the 5th land, activate a hive, and attack for 6. And it's not going to take many hits of 6 to end this game.
He's going to go for the blood token here. He discarded a Thoughtseize. He's going to get in for 3. Seth really wants one more threat. Like you said, it could be the hive if he's got another land or just anything.
And the draw off the blood was a Cavern of Souls, so hive is live.
Good enough. He's got 5 cards, Seth.
I think no real reason to hold the Cavern here, because if you draw a tap land next turn, you want to be able to play it to make Vein Ripper off the top a live draw. So you don't really want to be holding a land in this spot. And Seth has a decent number of tap lands, Black Cliffs. There's 4 in the deck. So there's sequences of draws here that would really incentivize you to play this Cavern this turn, even though you are giving JD the information that I'm hellbent, I've got no action.
Is that the upside of holding on to Cavern?
It's purely information.
Can Jean-Emmanuel play around anything at this point?
No.
Okay, so there's Cavern of Souls. So JD knows exactly what's up. Can he find a land so we can... Yes, he did. He found Otawara. That still doesn't quite get him anywhere.
No.
He's got the negate held up, but it's one step towards at least maybe a Crackling Drake down the line. Something.
Look, Crackling Drake is pretty good here. The big issue is Hive has Menace, so the first Drake won't stop all of the damage, just the Harvester damage.
And there's 6. He's going to read the Hive real quick. And he's down to 9.
Probably just making sure Hive doesn't have to exile something from Seth's graveyard. And there's the Cliffs. That's exactly the reason Seth plays the Cavern the previous turn, because now Vein Ripper off the top is an uncounterable threat.
Okay, and there was a 4th land there for Jean-Emmanuel Depraz. This will give him access to Crackling Drake, which can hold back the Blood Tithe Harvester, but not the Hive. He would fall down to 6.
The clock isn't that fast.
And it takes basically all of Seth's mana to do so. So there's the Drake pass. This is a big draw step here for Manfield.
Vein Ripper would be pretty close to GG.
And it looks like he's found another land as well. So we're just going to see the Hive of the Eye Tyrant come in, I'm assuming.
That is, I think, Seth's only option here.
How good has the leyline been this game?
I mean, it's caused us to have a game. I think Seth's hand, as it looked, wouldn't have really been great had JD had those cards in the graveyard, because instead of this Drake, we would have seen exile all of these Treasure Cruise for 2 mana, draw a bunch of gas, leave up Negate, or continue developing. It's been fantastic.
All right, here comes the Hive. Down to 6 goes Jean-Emmanuel Depraz, but it does look like he's going to get to untap. He's not facing lethal either.
Nope.
So he has a little bit of an opening. His hand is terrible. He's got 2 effectively dead Treasure Cruise, but he does have an Arclight Phoenix, and that could stabilize the board if Seth is completely out of gas.
Yeah, the easiest calculation for this leyline right now is essentially Seth put a card in play at the beginning of the game that has Thoughtseize JD twice.
Okay.
That's 2 Treasure Cruises that just are not in the game. So JD is down 2 cards to Seth's 1.
And he paid no mana for it.
No mana.
I'll take that all day.
Yeah.
And that's all it's done so far.
So far,
yeah,
exactly.
If he draws another Treasure
That's the
Cruise,
current baseline.
Yeah. So I believe that Seth has passed the turn. And there's the Arclight Phoenix.
That's a blocker.
And he's also got a follow-up land and another one to follow it up after that. This is big. Can Seth find one more piece of action? Something huge like a Vein Ripper or a removal spell?
That'd be great. Rending Volley would be great.
So Kenzan, Crucible of Defiance, not quite, right?
No, you really want to use that to channel, make some creatures, but against this board, the 1/1s aren't doing great. I think Seth is committed to just going Hive and attack to get this Phoenix off the board. Yes, you lose a Hive, but you have a second one. You can't really pass a turn not doing anything because soon enough, JD will turn this around. He'll start attacking with Crackling Drakes, and Seth is at 13. All of these pings from the Sulphur Springs earlier, the Bitter Triumph where he had to pay 3 life to cast it, at the time, Seth was pressuring. It was great. Now, they're going to start taking their toll if Seth can't continue pressuring.
Yeah, and I wouldn't be surprised if Jean-Emmanuel could get this to be a 2, maybe a 3-turn clock with the Crackling Drake in short order if he can stabilize enough. So this is going to be a forced trade effectively. Seth is going to attack with the Hive. We're going to see a double block. The Phoenix is going to go into exile, but the Crackling Drake is still sitting there. And remember, it does count cards in exile as well as graveyard, so the Leyline of the Void does not affect its power.
And one card to be aware of, there's a Hall of Storm Giants in JD's lands.
That's
he has a
smasher.
Spire Bluff Canal in hand.
This is getting interesting.
Third treasure
Oh, he
cruise.
did actually find the 3rd treasure cruise. If JD can pull off this win on a Leyline having drawn 3 crews and never cast one, that would be insane.
Leyline of the Void just doing the heaviest lifting in the universe right now.
Uh-oh, math is happening.
Yeah.
If you're Seth, you're like, come on, I had this. It was right there.
Well, you can't attack. That's
right.
part of the issue is because you don't have Haul Up, right now you're facing lethal. You're at 6 against 6 power. You can bluff it, maybe, but in Seth's position, if you're on a 2-turn clock from this Drake, you're going to attack. You're not going to play around it. You don't have the removal spell. If you're JD, you have to play to your outs, and maybe that involves attacking here, but I don't think so. Not against Seth Manfield.
He's going to pass a turn. Yeah, Seth is just going to go for it. So right now, it's negate and nothing for Jean-Emmanuel. He's clinging to this Crackling Drake. He's likely to see half of his life total disappear. A slow roll here from Seth, but it's another land. He has really just hit a brick wall. Nothing, nothing, nothing the last 3 draw steps, but he's got that backup Hive of the Eye Tyrant, and that can knock Jean-Emmanuel from 6 to 3 and threaten lethal next turn.
And that means it might not matter, because if you put JD to 3 here, then next turn, even if JD produces a second blocker for the Menace creature, the Blood Tithe Harvester is now lethal. So 3 is the magic number, and that means Seth is in a pretty unstoppable position here, where JD will need a removal spell specifically for the Hive in order to be in it.
How many treasure crews does Seth Manfield know about? Was it just the one when
just
he
the one.
saw? Okay.
I think you can pretty safely assume there's a second one in there, considering JD has been missing land drops. I think you can reasonably assume there's one piece of counter magic in JD's hand.
Because Seth hasn't put anything on
Seth
the
hasn't put anything that would get countered forward.
Down to 3 falls Jean-Emmanuel Depraz. Seth Manfield 1 attack step away from advancing to the semifinals and knocking out JED. There is land go now from Seth. It's going to take a miracle here from Jean-Emmanuel. Can he even get out of this?
Prankster is a start.
Okay, I was going to say...
Because that gives you potentially a removal spell and a creature. Or 2 creatures. 2 creatures is good enough here for now.
Do you get... Can he only just cast Picklock Prankster from this point?
No, so Free the Fae is interesting because the cards don't have to go to the graveyard to be able to get them. So you can Free the Fae and get the cards that are being exiled. So this is good enough.
Okay.
I think you take another Picklock Prankster because that's a guaranteed creature, and that keeps you alive against this exact board state. You go Prankster, play both Pranksters.
So you use up all 6 mana.
Yep.
And you just get to have 3 blockers.
Yep. Against essentially 3 attackers if you count Menace as an extra attacker.
Free the Fae has been the absolute all-star. It's what bailed Jean-Emmanuel out in the first game when he almost ran out of gas.
Yep.
And there it is, Picklock Prankster is the chosen card. And that's an adventured Prankster there.
Look, it's precarious. It loses to a lot, but you have to play to your outs. And here's the thing about Seth Manfield. This is the unfortunate position for JD. If there's one way that I would describe the Hall of Famer, world champion Seth Manfield as a player, Marshall, and you'll agree with this, I think, it's no fear. Seth is a player that plays always to his outs.
He is gutsy, no doubt about it.
Wow. That's a pass.
He passed the turn.
He's hoping that Seth will spin up the hive and he'll be able to free the Fae into a lightning axe.
Oh, that's a lot riding on that free the Fae.
There's 4 copies, I believe. Is there one in the graveyard? Or exile?
No.
I don't think so. He hasn't played one this turn.
That's a very live draw.
Harvester doesn't do it. Not enough mana to channel Sokazan as well.
This is Jean-Emmanuel playing to win rather than not die. It's risky, because if he can get that hive off the battlefield, there's really nothing left, and he could probably win the game with the Crackling Drake in short order from there. But if he misses, it's over.
It's over. But look, these Free the Faes are making this Drake bigger. A lot bigger.
Dramatically so. All right, there's Hive of the Eye Tyrant. It's coming in. Here we go. Jean-Emmanuel says, I'm going to free the Fae. Can I hit an answer?
3.
That's
Opt is a redraw.
Opt is a redraw. He'll still have 1 mana left over.
2 more looks.
It's never easy. Jean-Emmanuel Depraz giving us all we asked for from this matchup between these 2 great world champions. Opt goes on the stack.
That's on an axe. Yeah, go to the bottom.
Okay, so he's going to show us already. Flip it for us. Oh, and it's a Steam Vent. Seth Manfield advances to the semifinals in a really tight match against Jean-Emmanuel Depraz.
Oh, that was fantastic stuff from both players. The power of Leyline of the Void on full display in that 3rd game. 3 copies of Treasure Cruise in JD's hand just being stranded. And Seth really played that matchup fantastically, but for JD, he took every little edge that he could, and you really can't blame him for trying to go for the quote-unquote numbers play of trying to find the lightning axe in that spot rather than just
like, it's just off the top of my head, but he had to be a heavy favorite there, right? Especially with the way it played out. I mean, he was already, what, a third of the way through the deck, something like that, between 15 and 20 cards through, and he ended up seeing 6 cards that turn and somehow missed still.
Yeah, you know, the numbers are close, but he went for what is mathematically a more likely way to win the game, and unfortunately just didn't quite pan.
So does he get to complain about being unlucky to his friends or not? That's the question.
I don't think so.
He played beautifully, though. And right now, we've got Riley with our winner.
I'm here with Seth Manfield, victorious in his quarterfinal against JED and Izzet Phoenix. Seth, I know lots of people will be looking at the Rakdos Vampires deck that you picked up. How did that match go, and do you think that was representative of the matchup between Rakdos and Izzet Phoenix?
Yeah, I mean, I was worried. I'll be honest, I had low expectations. Jean-Emmanuel Depraz, obviously great player, has been playing Phoenix for a long time now, and it's a challenging matchup for Vampires. I do have 4 copies of Leyline of the Void after sideboard, which he didn't have that many answers to, so that was kind of my after sideboard plan. So I was hoping to steal one of the game 1s, and then I felt like after sideboard I would be a little bit favored. As it turns out, those games were just very swingy, like top decks back and forth. The games didn't really go according to plan for either side, but those are the types of games that I like to play.
You've obviously got a lot of experience here at Pro Tour Sunday. This is your 11th, 12th, 4 billionth top finish. Who knows? You've already won a Pro Tour as well. How much do you think that experience helps you in a high-pressure situation like this?
I mean, I am a nervous person naturally. Having been in a situation like this before definitely does help. I'm used to the cameras a little bit more, and playing on Sunday in the spotlight, and it's just fun. Like, it doesn't get old, the feeling of making a Pro Tour top 8.
That's really, really good to hear, mate. Best of luck to you as we head into the semi-finals. I'm going to let you get away and prepare for whatever potential matchup it may be. But Seth, thanks for joining us once again, and the very best of luck to you throughout the rest of the top 8.
All right, thank you.
Great stuff there from Riley. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, though, we're going to be queuing up Sam Pardee versus Min Ying Chen. We'll be back right after this.